Every day. Tech companies sitting on literal mountains of user data just, push out updates that absolutely enrage their users.
Yeah, it happens all the time.
Right. I mean, they have the advanced analytics, they run the focus groups, they have armies of researchers, and they monitor like every single click. So why is it that teams with nearly infinite data still consistently make these terrible, high-cost product decisions?
Well, it is really the defining paradox of modern product development.
Yeah.
We assume that because a team has total visibility into user behavior, they inherently possess clarity.
Right, like more data magically equals better choices.
Exactly. But when you look closely at how these organizations actually operate, I mean, it becomes pretty obvious that they aren't suffering from a lack of information. They're suffering from an inability to interpret it.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because our mission for today's deep dive is to figure out exactly how to turn that scattered, messy research into decision-ready product direction.
Yes, that is the goal.
And we are pulling insights today from a really comprehensive breakdown of a system called Flowlytics, which is essentially an operating system for UX research.
It's a fascinating framework.
It really is. And going through this source material, you quickly realize that throwing more data at a confused team is, well, it's like throwing gasoline on a fire.
That is the core argument we are exploring today. The bottleneck isn't data acquisition, it's decision quality.
Decision quality, right?
Yeah, and that weakness in decision-making is driven by two specific culprits, which are fragmented evidence and rushed interpretation. I mean, when your evidence lives in a dozen different silos, the reasoning you build on top of it is just going to be incredibly shallow.
So if a team is drowning in all this fragmented data, the obvious intuitive fix is to just, hire a data scientist to build a master dashboard, right?
That is exactly the instinct most companies have.
Right. You just pipe all the APIs into one screen, aggregate the customer interviews, the support tickets, the surveys, and boom, you have clarity.
But that actually makes the problem worse. It's not an aggregation problem, it is an interpretation problem. Just piling all the data into one massive repository doesn't give you a strategy.
Right. Having the ingredients doesn't mean you know what to cook. It's like having a kitchen full of random groceries, but no recipe. You end up with a lot of frantic activity, but no dinner.
That is a perfect analogy. And let's imagine a hypothetical scenario to see how this plays out in the real world.
Yeah.
Let's say a team is building a fitness app specifically designed for marathon runners.
Okay, marathon app.
And they are trying to figure out why user retention just completely drops off after 3 weeks.
I can picture it. They set up customer interviews. They send out email surveys. The sales team is taking notes on competing apps.
Exactly.
And customer support is probably buried in help tickets about like GPS syncing issues or something. Meanwhile, the executives have their own internal assumptions about what runners want. Maybe they assume everyone just wants a social leaderboard.
Precisely. Now, all that information is valuable, but the interview notes are sitting in a shared document, the survey results are in a spreadsheet, the analytics are in some proprietary visualization tool.
And the executive's hunch is just floating around in a random Slack channel.
Right. Because the information arrives in completely different formats and lives in completely separate places, the team just cannot see the connective tissue. They end up with frantic activity, like you said, but no actual momentum.
What's incredibly frustrating about this dynamic is the sheer waste of human effort. I mean, you have brilliant UX researchers doing the hard work of uncovering genuine human insights, but those insights just hit a brick wall.
They absolutely do.
They do the interviews, they find out that marathon runners actually hate the social leaderboard and just want better audio cues during their long runs, but the finding gets lost. It just becomes a fragmented bullet point on a slide deck.
The UX graveyard.
Yeah, exactly. The quotes from real human beings just become decoration to justify a decision an executive already made.
And research without a roadmap connection isn't insight. It's just corporate entertainment. It becomes an archive rather than an active input.
Corporate entertainment. Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, the entire purpose of UX research is to reduce uncertainty. But if that research doesn't securely connect to the actual choices the product team is making, it isn't changing outcomes. It's just being admired.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because if the root of the problem is that disconnected data dies in a vacuum, then the solution must be a system that structurally forces data to link to action.
Exactly.
And this brings us to what might be the most critical concept in modern product strategy, which is evidence traceability.
Traceability is the antidote to that research graveyard we just talked about. It is the core mechanism that turns a static document into a living strategic asset.
So let's walk through how evidence traceability actually works mechanically.
Yeah.
Sticking with our Marathon app example, let's say the product manager stands up in a meeting and claims that building a social leaderboard is the absolute highest priority for the next quarter. If the team is practicing evidence traceability, they can't just accept that at face value, right?
No, they cannot. Traceability means there must be a clear, unbroken trail behind that conclusion.
A clear trail.
Yes. The ultimate test of a team strategy is whether anyone can point to a major roadmap decision, ask, what is this based on, and get a grounded, factual answer.
Not just an executive hunch.
Right, and not a quote from one angry user taken completely out of context either.
Huh?
The team should be able to literally trace the decision down to the synthesis phase, and from there trace it all the way back to the raw, validated user interviews and market data.
But wait, let me put on my project manager hat and push back on this for a second.
Sure, go ahead.
If I have a team of developers waiting for tasks, demanding a clear trail for every single feature or adjustment sounds, honestly, exhausting. Doesn't that just bog a team down?
I hear that all the time.
I mean, we are constantly told that modern teams need to move fast, ship features, and iterate quickly. If we have to trace every single decision back to its source, aren't we going to just lose our competitive agility?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, we really have to look at the environment teams are operating in today. The internet has fundamentally changed the value of speed.
How so?
Today, gathering surface-level information is unbelievably easy. You can get AI-generated summaries of competitor features in 3 seconds. You can pull trend reports instantly, but that sheer speed actually creates false confidence.
Oh, wow. Speed creates false confidence. That is a brilliant way to frame it.
It really is.
Because getting an answer quickly makes you feel like you've done the work, even if the answer is completely shallow.
Exactly. When everyone in your market can get an answer fast, speed itself is no longer your competitive advantage. The true differentiator becomes the quality of your reasoning.
Right, the depth of it.
Yeah, it's the discipline of the evidence behind your choices.
Yeah.
So, to your point about slowing teams down, traceability does introduce friction, but it is strategic friction.
Strategic friction.
It slows teams down in the exact places they need to be slowed down, which prevents them from rushing into building a 6-month project based on a completely false assumption.
So you are intentionally slowing down the decision so you don't have to slow down the development later to fix a massive, expensive mistake.
Precisely.
But identifying that we need traceability is only half the battle, right? You can't trace a path backward if you didn't build a structured path forward. So how do teams actually sequence this work without getting completely overwhelmed?
Right, because you can't just yell "be traceable" at a messy team and expect them to magically transform.
Exactly.
You are touching on the necessity of what is called a progression workflow. This really requires redefining what research actually is. Good research is not just a chaotic menu of methods you pick from at random.
Okay, so what is it then?
It is a deliberate sequence from raw signals to finalized strategy. And systems like Flowlytics explicitly model this progression, so teams literally cannot skip steps.
Okay, let's break down that progression. Step 1 is establishing the foundation. And the core argument from the brief here is that weak framing creates weak research.
Yes, absolutely.
If our Marathon app team doesn't clarify the product context, the specific decisions they need to make, and the actual scope of the project before they start interviewing people, they are just doomed.
Doomed is the right word. Without a foundation, you are just throwing a net into the ocean and hoping you catch something useful.
Right.
If the team cannot clearly articulate what specific user behavior they're trying to understand, they just have no criteria for judging the quality of the answers they get back.
Makes sense. So once that strict foundation is set, the progression moves to step 2, which is expanding the evidence. This is the gathering phase, right?
Yeah.
Market signals, competitor patterns, user themes.
Exactly. But it's crucial to note here that internet research and rapid market pulses are framed strictly as context gathering.
Right. You can't take a quick trend report at face value.
No, because context is not a shortcut to truth. Those rapid signals help you understand the broader environment, but they require deep interpretation, which leads directly into step 3, synthesis.
Okay, synthesis. This is where you take all that messy, raw evidence and translate it into tools you can actually use to reason about human behavior.
Yes. That's where the magic happens.
And I want to make sure we define some of the specific tools used here because they get thrown around a lot in corporate meetings. This is where teams use the jobs to be done framework, right? Which basically asks, what specific task is the user hiring our product to do?
Right, exactly.
So in our Marathon app, the user isn't hiring the app to look at a pretty chart. They are hiring it to keep their pacing steady during a grueling 20-mile run.
That is a perfect distinction. And another really common synthesis tool is the journey map. Instead of just listing features, a journey map visually plots out every single click, emotion, and frustration the user experiences.
From the moment they open the app to the moment they finish their run.
Yes. And these aren't just pretty documents to hang on a wall. They take the raw signals, pressure check them, and format them so the team can logically debate their choices.
I do have a question about one of the most common synthesis tools, though, the proto-persona.
Yes.
For those unfamiliar, a proto-persona is an early provisional model of your target user. It's like a best guess you make before you have all the hard evidence.
Right.
Let's say our team draws up a hypothetical user named Marathon Mike. My worry is, how do we prevent a provisional model like Mike from mutating into an assumed fact?
Happens so often.
I've seen teams sketch out a fake user on day one, and 3 months later they are making million-dollar decisions based on what they assume Mike wants without ever verifying if Mike actually exists in the real world.
This raises such an important question, and it really highlights why treating research as a strict progression is so vital. Proto-personas are incredibly useful early in a project.
Because you need a starting point.
Exactly. You need a working model to get the cross-functional team aligned and speaking the same language. But they become incredibly dangerous the moment those assumptions are presented as validated facts.
Yeah, so how does a team mathematically or, I guess, procedurally prevent that mutation?
The discipline, which is a core philosophy in systems like Flowlytics, is explicitly tagging them as provisional within the workflow itself.
Oh, like literally labeling them.
You literally label them as assumptions.
Mhm.
They exist specifically to be challenged, broken down, and updated by the hard evidence you gather in the subsequent phases.
Yeah.
They are not set in stone. They are a starting hypothesis.
Got it.
You have to actively replace the assumed traits of Marathon Mike with the verified traits of your actual users.
You have to keep the proto and proto-persona.
Exactly.
But even if a team builds that progression perfectly, from foundation to synthesis, how do they actually know when it is safe to pull the trigger? How do they know when it's time to start writing code and spending money?
This brings us to what might be the most critical discipline of all, which is decision readiness.
Decision readiness.
Yes. Decision readiness is the practice of stopping the entire process and asking a highly specific, very uncomfortable question. Is the current evidence we possess actually strong enough to justify the strategic decision we are about to make?
It sounds so simple, but teams violate this rule constantly because of the trap of premature strategy.
Oh, constantly.
Leadership often demands strategic direction before the team has enough real synthesized evidence to support it. They want the roadmap right now.
Yeah.
They want the feature list by Friday.
And when leadership demands a strategy before the research is synthesized, they aren't actually getting a strategy. They are getting a formalized guess.
A formalized guess. Wow, that is like trying to pull a cake out of the oven before it's fully baked just because you're hungry. You just end up with a mess.
That's a great way to put it.
Demanding a strategy before synthesizing the research is like trying to build the third floor of a skyscraper before the concrete foundation has cured. You can put up the walls if you really want to force the timeline, but the moment real market pressure hits that building, the whole thing collapses into a very expensive pile of assumptions.
It ruins the entire project because they couldn't wait for the foundational process to finish. But what's fascinating here is how a system built on evidence traceability actually intervenes in that dynamic.
How so?
Let's look at how decision readiness works mechanically on a random Tuesday afternoon. Imagine the engineering team is waiting for their sprint plan, and the product manager wants to greenlight that social leaderboard we talked about.
Okay.
In a workflow governed by decision readiness, they can't just verbally declare that they are ready.
They have to actually prove it.
Exactly. They open the workflow, look at the proposed initiative, and visually verify if the foundational evidence has been tagged as validated.
And if it hasn't?
If the system shows that the core user problem hasn't cleared the synthesis stage, if it is still marked as a provisional assumption, the workflow essentially flashes a red light.
Oh, wow.
It forces a hard conversation. It asks, we are about to bet a significant portion of our budget on an assumption. Are we aware of that? And are we okay with that risk?
That changes the entire vocabulary of the meeting. Instead of two executives arguing over, I think we should do this, versus I feel like we should do that, the conversation shifts to, do we have enough traceable proof to do this?
Exactly.
By making the gaps in the evidence physically visible on a screen, it exposes those assumptions before they manifest as broken software.
It creates a real culture of accountability. When decision readiness is treated as a structural requirement rather than just a corporate buzzword, the organization stops reacting to market noise.
Right.
They stop building features just because a competitor built them, and they start building features because they have a traceable line of evidence proving their users actually need them.
So, what does this all mean? When we step back and look at the entirety of this deep dive, the ultimate takeaway fundamentally shifts how we should perceive the role of UX research.
It really does.
Good research is not simply about understanding users. It is not about generating empathy just for the sake of having a warm, empathetic corporate culture. It is fundamentally, structurally, about improving the quality of your product decisions.
That is the pivotal shift. The value of a framework like Flowlytics is that it serves as an operating system for that exact shift.
Right.
It is not a digital filing cabinet where research goes to die. It is a deliberate, forward-moving workflow designed to move teams from raw context to validated evidence to careful synthesis, and finally to a highly defensible strategic direction.
And for you listening right now, whether you are designing software, plotting a massive marketing campaign, or managing a small team in a completely different industry, the core lesson here applies universally.
Right.
Your decisions are only as strong as the connected, traceable evidence beneath them. If your foundation is a graveyard of disconnected facts and provisional guesses, your strategy is running on borrowed time.
You know, it leaves us with a rather profound paradox to consider as we navigate the modern business landscape.
Oh, what's that?
Well, we talked earlier about how the sheer speed of the internet and the rise of instant AI-generated summaries inherently creates a dangerous level of false confidence.
Right, the idea that speed is no longer an advantage.
Exactly. It makes me wonder if rapid information gathering is now just a commodity and speed is no longer the ultimate advantage. Will the most successful and innovative teams of the future actually be the ones who intentionally engineer friction and slowness into their decision-making processes?
Well, purposefully slowing down the architect so you can actually verify the concrete has cured rather than rushing to build a skyscraper on a swamp. That is an incredibly powerful thought to chew on.